What is up, everybody? Thanks for tuning in for another edition of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. Got Ben Wolk with me on this Tuesday, talking a little Georgia, Tennessee, getting ready for this top 15 matchup in Neyland Stadium. Going to focus a lot of this conversation on the matchup in Week 3 between Georgia and Tennessee. We'll start the episode talking about Week 2, final takeaways from Georgia, Austin Peay, share what Kirby Smart and players had to say about the Vols on Monday as they get ready for their first SEC game of the season and doing it on the road, no less. Dive into what we're expecting from this game, what we're watching out for when this game gets underway on Saturday. And we'll finish this one off with a little bit of Georgia basketball talk. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube at Dawgs 24/7. Go subscribe to Dawgs247.com if you haven't already. And we hope you guys will stick around. Should be a fun show. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. Got Ben Wolk with me on this Tuesday afternoon, talking Dogs and Vols. Georgia and Tennessee going to be facing off on Saturday in Week 3, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time, kickoff on ABC. Number 6, Georgia, number 15, Tennessee. Going to be a big-time matchup, the first SEC game for both schools. Georgia starting conference play on the road. A lot of our conversation today is going to be about that matchup, not only what we're watching for, some of the expectations we have, but also sharing what Kirby Smart and a couple of the players had to say on Monday as they officially started Tennessee week. But Ben, before we get this started, I don't know how much you've gotten a chance to go outside today. We kind of got a little bit of fall weather, man. It's starting to feel really like football season in Athens.
It's perfect. I mean, this weather coming in just before the Georgia-Tennessee game. I know it's not going to be quite that way on Saturday. I think it's going to get back up a little bit. But quarter zip season is finally upon us, at least for a brief period of time before we get it again in a couple of weeks.
Well, let's start with Week 2 and put some finishing touches on Georgia's 28-6 victory over Austin Peay. Shout out to Ben and Kipp, did a great job carrying the majority of that reaction episode on Saturday night. I hopped in for the last probably 10, 15 minutes or so, but I wanted to set you up, Ben. Any final thoughts from that game? Anything that's kind of stuck with you in the days since Saturday night?
Offensive conversation has dominated what people have talked about since the game, and I understand why. When you only score 28 points against Austin Peay, that's going to happen. But I encourage everyone to go and rewatch the game. If you're trying to kill some time this week, before the Tennessee game, go rewatch just the offensive snaps. And to me, and Kirby brought this up yesterday when he was pressed a little bit on some of the offensive questions. And I know that Georgia fans want to hear Kirby Smart kind of lash into the offense right now and some of the play calling or the decision making or the downfield aggressiveness or whatever it might be. But if you go back and watch the game, and Kirby Smart says this, there's really only one possession in the entire game offensively where Georgia's just not moving the football well. Now, I know when you're playing a team like Austin Peay, people expect more than just moving the football well. You want points, but your first possession of the game, you have 7 offensive possessions with Gunnar Stockton as the quarterback in this game, which is not very many. And the first possession of the game, Georgia fumbles on a play where they picked up a first down. Georgia scores touchdowns on the next 2 possessions of the game. That first possession of the second quarter is the one that Kirby Smart alludes to, where that one you just really didn't move the ball. 3 plays, 6 yards. I'm seeing that we're getting a possible streaming issue on Facebook. Jordan, should we just move along?
Keep it going.
Sorry for if you're listening to this after the fact on podcast or YouTube and you normally listen on Facebook, we apologize. We'll get it right next time around. We know it's not on our end. That second possession of the second quarter, Georgia moves the ball well, actually advances the ball, and then has back-to-back plays where they get negative yards on tipped screens or the play just goes backwards. So, and then you have a great 2-minute drive there to end the first half, and you don't punch it in there in the end. I think that sours the taste for everyone about how everything went in the first half. You go into the second half, you score a touchdown, you have a fumble on a play where you picked up a first down with London Humphreys, and then you had a 99 play touchdown drive to end the game. So I think that when you look at each drive individually, there's really only one drive where I think you can truly look at it, fumbles aside, and that's another issue. But that's, to me, that's not what people are talking about. People are talking about Georgia's not aggressive enough in the passing game. Georgia's not, people are losing faith potentially in Gunnar Stockton week to week. Well, I just think when you look back at that game, Georgia took what it was given. It ran the ball really, really well. People were annoyed by how much Georgia used the screen game. But when you go and look at how effective Georgia was in the screen game in that one, it's very easy to understand why you just take what they're giving you. And again, 4 of 7 offensive possessions, you score touchdowns. The one right before the half should get punched in. 4 of 8 offensive possessions, I apologize, scored offensive touchdowns, should punch it in there at the end of the first half to make it 5. You have 2 possessions that end in turnovers that you picked up the first down on those plays. So again, if you want to draw on the negatives from that game, you certainly can. I think there's a lot of positives offensively that you can draw on. And I also think the way that Georgia approached that Austin Peay game is going to look a heck of a lot different than they're going to approach this Tennessee game offensively.
Yeah, going back and watching this game, I thought was pretty helpful, and did a rewatch and broke down some of the bigger plays as well in a separate story. I think my biggest thing coming out of that game, you want to see Gunnar Stockton have a bounce back, but the offensive line too. I mean, I think it's very easy to put a lot on Gunnar, and there was a lot that he could have done better, but I thought the offensive line was lacking at times. And, I think, and I wrote about this on Sunday, the big question is how much of this was we want to play it conservative because it's Austin Peay and we don't really have to put it all out there versus this is just what this offense is. And we're not going to know until Saturday in Knoxville. There's just no way to know. But, yeah, I mean, we talked about this, I think, during that weather break on Saturday and especially after the game. Ben, how different are the vibes if they just score that touchdown right before half? I mean, people still would not have been thrilled. And again, that doesn't, mask or make up for the mistakes we did see or the missed opportunities. But I do think the conversation winds up being different if they just score and not fumble around and just make a total mess of the end of the first half.
No, I completely agree. Like, I know you don't want to have 3 and outs against Austin Peay, but you are entitled to have a 3 and out or 2 in football games. Like, that is just the way it works. And I think if Georgia doesn't fumble the ball twice when they're picking up first downs on those plays, like that's what I think gets lost. Like Georgia's moving the ball well on both of those drives. And on both of the plays where there were fumbles, Georgia had just picked up first downs that was going to be extending drives on those plays. So if that doesn't happen, if you punch the ball in there to end the second quarter, first half, it's a totally different scoreboard that you're looking at. And I think a lot of people's emotions are dictated by the scoreboard more than the play to play. And again, I hear what people are saying about the aggressiveness downfield. Georgia took no shots down the field. I put out the Pro Football Focus breakdown that was doing the spots on the field where Gunnar was throwing it. It was obvious that he was not taking any shots. I think he really only sent one down the field, and that was to Dylan Bell. And it was weird to me that was the one that they chose to take the shot downfield because there were better opportunities than that throughout the game. We're going to talk about this more throughout this episode with some of the interviews that we did yesterday, but you hear too much about Georgia's explosive passing game in practice, what they've done throughout scrimmages, what Gunnar's ability is on the deep shots. I am convinced of it that we're going to see a lot more of that as we get into SEC play. And I will also say Gunnar Stockton on that first possession of the game runs for like 7 or 8 yards, takes a pretty significant hit. I made a comment about it in the press box at the time. I was like, that's not what you want to be doing against Austin Peay. I don't think that he had a designed run for the rest of the game after that. I think he had a couple of scrambles when the pocket was collapsing and he picked up a couple of yards, and Kirby Smart talked about that. Gunnar Stockton's great at turning 2nd and 15 into 2nd and 8 just by picking up a few yards and not taking a sack, which he has not done yet this season, despite the fact there have been some opportunities for him to be sacked. So again, I'm not hitting the panic button on this Georgia offense or Gunnar Stockton or what they're capable of yet. I just think it was a boring ho-hum matchup against Austin Peay where Gunnar Stockton did not see or miss some opportunities downfield. But I think just because you didn't see it downfield in that one does not mean that you're not going to see it downfield in future games. And I think everything that I've heard about Gunnar Stockton, I think it suits him best that he's had a game like this right before Georgia enters SEC play, because he's the type of guy who is not comfortable whatsoever with any levels of failure. And I know that his standard for himself is much higher than everyone else's that's been complaining about him this week.
To your point, Colby Young talked about that on Monday when he said, there are plays in practice or times where Gunnar does something and he's like, I want to do that again. I want to try to make it better. And they're like, no, it's okay. And he's like, no, I really want to make sure and get this right. And I think that's a good point to make. And for me, I don't think it's time to hit the panic button on Gunnar Stockton now. If he struggles like he did at Tennessee, if he struggles against Tennessee like he did against Austin Peay and they can't push the ball down the field, then yeah, I think it's fair to wonder and fair to ask questions about what needs to happen at quarterback going forward. I did want to shout out Aaron Murray did a fantastic breakdown of Gunnar Stockton. You can check it out on YouTube. I think it's Mac and Murray Show. I watched that this morning, about 25 minutes, and he did a really good job. And it's especially for me helpful as someone who's never played quarterback at ever, much less at the SEC level, to hear Aaron Murray. He played for Mike Bobo. He understands what he's looking at and what the expectation is. I would highly encourage folks to go check that out. Other things for me out of that Austin Peay game, I really like what Chauncey Bowen showed. I still think it's like Nate Frazier, Dwight Phillips Jr. has been the breakout of these first two games, but Dwight didn't touch the ball quite as much as Chauncey against Austin Peay. Really like what Chauncey Bowens did. I liked what I saw when Dontrell Glover came in at right guard and what Bo Hewley did at right tackle. We don't know yet what's going to happen. I'll kind of talk about what Kirby shared on the injury front in a little bit. But if they get put in a pinch and that's what they have to do, again, it's tough if you're going to be starting a true freshman right guard. But I like what they showed. Defense played well, was impressed with what they did. And probably my last note, Ben, is that I would feel a whole lot differently about this matchup for Georgia, really just as a whole, the two teams playing, if Dalen Everett was not available, because I thought he played really, really well in week 2, missed week 1 after he was dealing with an ankle injury. If you're talking about trying to slow down this Tennessee offense with Dalen watching on the sideline, I think that would be a tall task. I think it's big to have Dalen back for this one.
Completely agree. Injuries are going to play a factor in this game on both sides. What does Georgia's right side of its offensive line look like? I know we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Someone just brought it up in the comment section as well, Alan Daniel, about Tennessee being without its 2 top cornerbacks, which they've gotten familiar with playing without those guys over the last couple of weeks. But it's going to be interesting to see how each of these teams game plan one another based on some of the injury setbacks that they've suffered so far early in the season.
Yeah, I mean, as wild as it is to be sitting here talking about week 3, you're losing. You will have guys go out of the lineup early, and that's just sort of the nature of playing football. And we'll see how the two teams handle it and what's ahead. All right, let's kind of talk about what Kirby Smart and the players had to say on Monday. We had a chance to talk to Kirby Smart, Colby Young, kicker Peyton Woodring. Good insight for all of those guys as they get ready for this big matchup with Tennessee. And as you can imagine, if you're listening to this, there was a lot of Gunnar Stockton talk on Monday. At one point, Kirby was asked about Gunnar getting ready to make his first road start. He had that neutral site game, the Sugar Bowl, but this is his first true road start playing in an SEC stadium that is not Stanford. Kirby was asked, how he thought that Gunnar would handle it, and this is what Kirby had to say.
I think it's going to be great. It's something that we practice for all year round. I don't believe in waiting until the week of the game. We do it in spring. We do it all preseason camp. We put a lot of pressure on the players in practice to communicate. A lot of times it's to keep both sides of the ball from hearing each other talk. So we want there to be. I don't want to hear the coaches talk. So you got to crank it up, and it almost becomes the norm to do that. But there's also a defense over there that you're trying to simulate, and that's hard to simulate because they are very good defensively. They create a lot of issues, very intelligent with their defensive staff in terms of protections, looks. They know what you're thinking, and they try to counter that. So that's the hurdle for us offensively that we all have to get over is making sure we understand what they're trying to do and understand what we're trying to do and do it better than they do it.
Ben, I don't know if you feel the way that I do when it comes to Gunnar, but just everything that's happened really in the last, I guess, 9 months, going back to that SEC title game and him having to be put in. Like I've kind of lost, kind of overlooked the fact that, oh, he hasn't made a true road start before just because of, how he had to play in the SEC title game, the Sugar Bowl. But this is going to be a true test, and it's going to be a real. I describe it as a proving ground, not only for Gunnar but also Mike Bobo and this offense. Now, when we're talking about Gunnar here, I want to talk specifically about him getting the play calls in and handling the noise, the things like that. How much concern do you have about the operational side with Gunnar and what he's going to be up against being up in Knoxville on Saturday?
Well, that's the bigger question to me than the being on the road from a pressure standpoint, playing in big time moments. Because when you come in and trailing in the second half against Texas in the SEC championship game, when you're down 20-3 against Notre Dame in a Sugar Bowl, like you've experienced high pressure, tough, difficult moments so far in your quarterback career. What you don't know as much is how does it sound in that environment, especially Neyland Stadium? Like everyone knows that it's going to be as big of a test. It preps you for Auburn later in the season. It preps you for Mississippi State later in the season when you're starting your year out on the road in Neyland Stadium. I'm sure that Georgia will have a great plan in place to prepare this week to be ready for that Neyland Stadium environment. If I'm not mistaken, Tennessee's only lost one game since 2023 or maybe even 2022 in Neyland Stadium, and it was to Georgia in 2023. And so it's not easy to go and win there. I'm not saying that Gunnar Stockton's just ready for the moment and going to be able to go and handle that, but he strikes me as the type of quarterback that is going to be prepared from an operational standpoint. I don't think he's going to let moments get too big of him because of what he has experienced in the past. Obviously, communication is really important. And I think it's funny, Colby Young brought up, Gunnar Stockton's voice and how loud he is. And like you can hear him very well. And he wasn't even talking about that. I don't really think in the context of playing at Tennessee, he was just talking about it generally in his command of the huddle. And so it seems like a small thing, but that can only help you when it comes to playing in a loud environment like Neyland Stadium. I will also note Kirby Smart is the guy who said you can't get louder than loud. So, everyone talks about Neyland Stadium and how loud it is. I imagine that it's not going to be, once you reach a certain point of loud, you've got to start communicating in different ways. And I'm sure that's going to happen all across SEC play this season.
Kirby Smart, not worried about the decibels. He just knows that it's what you got to deal with playing in the SEC every week. Coming off of the game against Austin Peay, Kirby had mentioned, wanting to see what Gunnar does in practice, have that translate to the field. And Kirby was sort of asked to follow up on that, how that will translate. And I thought this answer was really interesting, Ben, because he kind of talked not so much about Gunnar, but the people around Gunnar.
Well, I don't think it's about him. I think it's about the 11 people with him, right? So when we say we'll see Gunnar do that and see it carry over, it requires the 11 people doing exactly what they did in practice for him to have success. Because in an offensive unit, one guy can mess up and that ruins that entire play. Typically on defense, one guy can mess up and it may not affect the play if it's not attacking that side. But there's several instances one guy's off, one guy's not at the right depth, one guy doesn't protect, or maybe Gunnar. But you can't have cumulative effect of those things and be effective. And we didn't. We really were very effective outside of really one drive. But outside of that, we were very effective with what we've done and got to continue to do that. I've seen them execute well in practice, and we want to continue to see that.
Kirby hit on the point you were making about the one drive. And aside from Kirby trying to put 12 men on the field there, I do think that, he was – I understand the point he's making. I think it goes back to the conversation we had to start this that, there were missed opportunities from Gunnar on Saturday against Austin Peay, but, I don't think the offensive line did him any favors at times. And, I do think on one side this is Kirby kind of, sticking up for his quarterback because Gunnar's gotten a lot of heat this week. And I think Gunnar probably realized that as soon as he went into the media scrum after the game. And I think Gunnar, he knew that there were missed opportunities. I don't think that was news to him coming off the field. But, Ben, I thought that Kirby was trying to do a good job of making it clear it's not all on Gunnar. although that's who everybody's going to be watching on Saturday.
Correct. And yeah, we got to blow the whistle on Kirby Smart. Too many men on the field. He tried to say the 11 men alongside Gunnar, which someone made the joke. Maybe he was talking about Mike Bobo, actually, when he was talking about the 11 other people alongside Gunnar. But I personally, and look, Jordan, we've had a lot of conversations on air and off air about where I feel like Gunnar Stockton fits in as from a talent standpoint and what he is capable of as a Georgia quarterback and what you should be expecting of him and what you shouldn't. And there are elements of his game that I think are going to be strengths, like moving the pocket. He's not going to be getting sacked as much as Georgia was getting sacked the last 2 seasons. He's going to be able to do some things in the design run game. He is going to be a quick decision maker, arguably a little too quick of a decision maker possibly in that game. I think there were a lot of situations where he was just going through his progressions way too fast and ends up hitting the check down on the screen. I also think it probably only encourages him to do it more when you're picking up as many yards in the screen game as Georgia was picking up. I mean, we were sitting next to Jake Rowe with Dawgs HQ during the game, and he said, I think it was like 3 possessions in, he's like, hey, if it's working, what do you do? Like, if they're not going to defend it to stop it, it's like, why you're not going to turn down 7 free yards on first down. And so it can frustrate people who want to see aggressiveness, but I don't know why. I'm just not. I think that the Gunnar Stockton conversation has now gone way too far in the other direction. I think people thought that Georgia was going to upgrade in certain areas of the passing game because they had Gunnar Stockton instead of Carson Beck. And I just don't think that that was a realistic way of looking at the season. But I also think now people are saying, should Ryan Puglisi be getting a look in this Tennessee game? How long I saw a question over at the Junkyard. How long is Gunnar's leash against Tennessee? And it is just ridiculously too early to be having a conversation like that based on what we've seen. I mean, again, we're 2 weeks removed from Gunnar Stockton having 4 touchdowns, dominating in both the rushing and passing game, and boosting himself into the top 3 in Heisman odds. Now, it went back the other direction in week 2, but now is where we find out what Georgia really is offensively. And I just think people need to find, if you thought Gunnar Stockton was going to be the savior this season and now you're ready to bench him, you need to find some middle ground there and start, operating in that space, because that is where you need to live in with the Gunnar Stockton experience this season.
Yeah, Gunnar very much with the peaks and valleys in the first 2 weeks. It's part of playing big time college football and especially being a quarterback. Now, Kirby was asked specifically about the downfield passing piece of the puzzle on Monday, and he kind of acted like he didn't really understand the question, got a little bit of clarification. And this is what Kirby shared just as far as, Georgia trying to move the ball down the field, throwing the ball vertically.
Well, success comes through throwing and catching it and getting opportunities to do that. We didn't protect long enough in some of our opportunities to get a chance to do that. So first thing is, what can we do, right? We're running the ball successfully. We ran the ball successfully and ran it, down their throats for the most part. When we do take shots, we want to keep a clean pocket. And he was able to do a lot of good things for us in terms of when the pocket's not clean, of not being 2nd and 20 or 2nd and 15, and instead we're 2nd and 8, avoiding some really long situations or giving up sacks. But certainly we want to be able to improve downfield passing game. I think that comes a little bit off of what we talked about before. How is the defense playing you? And different defenses play different ways.
I think that kind of goes back to the point that you brought up that Jake had said, the fact that, look, if they're playing you 7-8 yards off, you just take those yards and you just roll with it. And again, it was a situation where I think Gunnar was a little too hesitant, not trying to, going through his progressions, as you said. But for me, the column I wrote on Sunday was basically, I went into this season, the first 2 games, and basically said, what happens here doesn't matter. What we're going to need to see is in week 3. Now, I said that thinking, Georgia's going to put up 45, 50 points in both games. The offense is going to look good. Doesn't mean anything till you do it in SEC play. A lot of that in week 1, not so much in week 2, but I still stand by the point. Like, this is the proving ground. This is where we find out if Gunnar Stockton can lead Georgia where they believe he can. And I think we have to reserve our judgment truly until they go to Knoxville and we see how he plays up there.
And quite frankly, like I hate to do this and already say like we're not going to totally know on Saturday. Like it's really what we see from these next two football games. Like I think everyone is just written this Alabama game off now as like oh whatever. It's like you're still going up and playing probably the second one of the top three most talented teams in college football. When Alabama comes to town, they annihilated their undermatched opponent last weekend as well. So it's, to me, we will learn a lot about Georgia this weekend on the road at Tennessee. I think we'll learn a lot as much on the defensive side too. I mean, I think we've all just drawn the conclusion that this Georgia defense is back closer to its 21-22 ways. And do we really know that yet? Like, have we really seen enough from opposing offenses to know exactly what to expect from this defense? Probably not. Like, I think we all sort of assume if Georgia's going to win this game, it's going to be in that, 20-17, 24-20 type of range. But for all we know, this is going to be a game where Georgia has to score 30 to win. So I don't know. But I think that, to your point, nothing that we've seen through 2 weeks is more indicative of this Georgia football team than what we're going to see on Saturday.
Now, I want to get into what I think is kind of being overlooked in all the Gunnar Stockton conversation. It's the offensive line. And, week 2, they go without Juan Gaston at right guard and without Ernest Green at right tackle. Kirby gave updates on Monday, said that they were hopeful, said at that point that they were going to learn more on Monday. I would really encourage you all, stay glued to Dawgs 24/7 on Tuesday night. We're going to talk to Kirby after practice. I know he will give an update. He will be asked to give an update. How much there is to it, we don't know. And important to remember too, this is something I'd kind of forgotten about. Wednesday night, we will have the first availability report because this is an SEC game, so we should get a sense there. We'll mention too, other injury update. Talon Taylor, he was good to go. He played early in that game and then didn't play quite as much as the game went on. And then Ethan Barbour, very significant ankle injury. I don't anticipate him playing again this year, but Kirby didn't say that. Basically said he was going to be out for a while. But the right side of the offensive line, the key area with those two starters out, Kirby was asked about how that group handled Saturday and just his thoughts going into week 3.
Yeah, a lot of guys played over there, which was the intent coming into the game with the temperature being as hot as it was and the weather. We felt like we would play some guys there and kind of see how guys did, see how guys played. It's been a rotating kind of deal all throughout camp. We've had guys in and out of the lineup during camp that's made us kind of platoon that side. And we've even flipped Monroe and flipped Micah over to that side at times. So, they had bright spots and they had disappointing spots, which is probably true for every position group on our field. But we got to continue to progress there, and we got to get the best guys in there and get them some continuity.
I'm going to say this, Ben. I am more concerned about the offensive line against Tennessee than I am Gunnar Stockton. And that is not to say that, I still need to see Gunnar Stockton go out there and play well, but I think really the key for Georgia having a chance to go to Knoxville and win this game is running the football. And to me, that starts up front. We know how good Tennessee's defensive fronts have been in recent years. Lost a lot of guys this offseason, but they've played well through 2 games. You and I both know Rodney Garner, former Auburn assistant, former Georgia assistant. His guys are going to be ready. I need to see that offensive line show some stability. Probably not going to dominate, but got to hold their own. And we don't know what's going to happen with those 2 spots. So that to me is the biggest question. I need to see the offensive line protect Gunnar. If I'm Tennessee, I'm coming after Gunnar early, and I want to make him prove, okay, yeah, I'm a capable quarterback who can throw more than 10 yards down the field. So I think this offensive line is going to be put to the test. And I think that would be the case even if they had all 5 starters. So for me, I want to watch this offensive line. How do they respond? Who do they put out there? Is there any rotation? And can they meet the moment in what's going to be a really tough environment in Knoxville?
It's a weird thing with this offensive line because a lot of what dominated the offseason conversation was, is Georgia going to be able to run the football this season, and how the offensive line's responsibility played into that. And Georgia's run the ball, I think, above expectations so far to start the season. And I think you can expect Georgia to be back to some of its, downhill, run the football identity. Didn't happen on the goal line there against Austin Peay, which probably, makes some people uncomfortable. But look, Gunnar Stockton basically wasn't involved in the running game on Saturday, and Georgia still almost had 200 yards rushing coming off of a game where it had 240 yards rushing with Gunnar Stockton heavily involved in the rushing game. So I think the offensive line has done its part in that respect. In pass pro, it hasn't been the case. I was just looking at Pro Football Focus. There's some interesting stats now that I look at it. When the pocket is kept clean this season, that's 50 dropbacks where the pocket is kept clean. Gunnar Stockton's 39 of 50, so that's 78% completion rate, 410 yards, and 2 touchdowns. What's weird, probably frustrates people some, his average depth of target on those throws is 4.8 yards. So he's really not trying to push the ball downfield when the pocket is kept clean. What's interesting, on 17 dropbacks this season, he's been under pressure. He's 1 for 8, which means 9 times, and I think this is notable, 9 times he's escaped pressure and run the ball, and he has not been sacked so far this season. So I think that is notable. Over half of the times that he's been pressured, he's been able to evade the pocket and turn it into some kind of positive, even if it's a small positive. But on passing attempts under pressure, he's 1 of 8. That's 12.5 yards or 12.5% completion rate, 6 yards, no touchdowns, obviously. His average depth of target on those throws is 11.3 yards. So over twice as much when the pocket is kept clean, which tells me a couple of things, and our eyes can tell us some of these things from watching the game as well. The pocket is broken down on plays where Georgia's been trying to take shots. I think that's been unfortunate from a timing standpoint because in the first game, he tries to take a shot to Talon Taylor, gets hit in the face, tries to take a shot to Dylan Bell. In this one, he's getting hit in the face. Like, you would like to see a little bit more sustained protection when Georgia is trying to advance the ball downfield. The other thing that tells me is Gunnar's probably holding the ball a little bit longer because he's waiting to see some plays develop. And so when he does that, there's just going to be less time and he's going to be under a little bit of pressure, a little more pressure. So I think it's twofold. I think that the Georgia offensive line needs to be able to protect a little bit longer if Georgia is going to be able to generate some downfield explosives in this game. And I think that Gunnar Stockton's clock just needs to be a little bit more aware of how he either needs to move the pocket, when he needs to get the ball out to be able to take shots in certain spots. Because, again, against this Tennessee defensive front, the pressure is only going to be amplified over the last 2 weeks. And so it's interesting. He is throwing the ball really effectively, whether it's downfield or not, when the pocket is kept clean. So if Georgia's able to do that, I like him to be able to dice up the opposing defenses. If he's under pressure, something's got to change, either with the offensive line trying to find some extra time here or there, or Gunnar Stockton getting a little bit more creative with his release.
Livia Sayer will do our position matchup preview later in the week. And for me, that's the one for me. Georgia offensive line, Tennessee defensive front. How do they play? Get into a little bit of what the players had to say on Monday. Peyton Woodring, I thought it was interesting. I don't know if this caught your attention. Him saying, I kind of like kicking on the road more. He said, it's quiet in Sanford Stadium when I go out to kick. I kind of like there being a little bit of noise, and seems like he, embraces that fully. I had to do the Big J journalism, Ben. It was Tennessee week. Peyton Woodring's from Louisiana. I had to ask, are you named after Peyton Manning? He said no, he is not. So I hope Dog Nation breathed a sigh of relief on that one. Just had to do my job. Had to ask that there.
No, that's fair.
Colby Young, I thought he was really good. Gave some good insight on his final year at Georgia, how grateful he was to get this opportunity to play one more year at Georgia. But he talked about Gunnar too, and I thought his answer was pretty interesting, just discussing Gunnar and what Gunnar's capable of.
He's explosive in practice. I've seen him make unbelievable next level plays. He has an unbelievable arm. I like to say he's kind of like a Russell Wilson type, the way he puts the ball in the air and he just drop it in the bucket. But when we play defenses that are not allowing us to throw that, we got to make sure just don't force it. We got a great running game, and just stay confident in yourself. It's going to come eventually. We got a long season ahead, and we're going to have a successful season throwing the ball. So just stay confident it's going to come.
Yeah, it's obviously a situation where Colby's going to say the right things about Gunnar, but I think if you're a Georgia fan, that should make you feel good. And I think, Ben, you and I are on the same page of just what we heard through the offseason, even into the season. We heard great things about this offense during practice. I don't think this is a situation where people are trying to wallpaper over a bad situation and just say things that aren't true. I think that Gunnar is making plays in practice, otherwise he wouldn't be starting, and that the people around him believe he can take that success and that he will be able to go out on the field and make big plays.
I thought that right there, that clip was the most probably reasonable but telling take about Gunnar Stockton that I've seen throughout this week. And like you said, I know, of course, Colby Young, anyone who wants to be negative right now is going to say, of course, Colby Young is going to say that. Colby Young doesn't have to say the exact word choices that he's choosing when he's talking about these things. You can talk about it without saying anything inflammatory and not say the certain things that he's saying. Like when you're saying that he's seen a guy make next level throws and that they have had an explosive passing game and that he's comparing him to a guy that's won Super Bowls in terms of what he's able to do in terms of dropping it in a bucket on field throws down the field. Like, again, I understand why people who haven't seen him do it, us included for that matter, aren't certain about what he's able to do with the downfield passing game. But I think that there are enough people who do see it every single day that I've spoken with, that you've spoken with, that have talked about it publicly about what he's able to do and know that, yes, Gunnar Stockton is able to pass the ball down. I mean, I will say this, we have seen him do it. We saw him hit Arian Smith perfectly in stride in the Sugar Bowl. We saw him hit Dylan Bell perfectly in stride in the Sugar Bowl. Hell, the touchdown that they threw to Cash Jones is down the field. Like when people are talking about downfield passing game, it's weird to say that it's coming from your third down running back, but in that situation on that route, that's part of the downfield passing game. So we have seen him do it already in big games. We just haven't seen him do it the last 2 weeks. And so I believe Colby Young. I believe Kirby Smart more than I believe somebody who is overreacting to an Austin Peay game where they only got to see him do certain things based on, and I know people are going to be annoyed by this part of it, but when you hear football guys that have broken down the film already this week and looked at things in a more advanced way than any of us have, if we're just being truthful with ourselves about it. Kirby Smart, Colby Young, talking about when the defense does certain things, you're not going to force the issue. You're not going to do X, Y, and Z. Like, if Tennessee does what Austin Peay did defensively, Georgia's probably going to be able to win the game comfortably because they're going to quick screen them to death. They're going to run the ball them to death. And is it going to be a 45-point win? No, but Georgia's going to end up winning the game comfortably because they're going to be able to do what they want at will defend offensively. Tennessee is not going to play Georgia that way because they are going to try and force Georgia to take some chances. And I am telling you that I believe Gunnar Stockton, when given the opportunity this season to take some chances for the first time, is going to hit on some of those.
Colby Young with 7 catches in that game against Austin Peay. I thought that was a good sign. I want to say this too, Ben. Had a Patriots fan text. You said Super Bowls for Russell Wilson. He just won one of them. He came real close. He came real close on that second one, but the New England had something.
Also, bad timing because he had a really rough Sunday, and I think he's probably going to get benched for Jackson Dart. So maybe not the best time for that comparison. But if you're just thinking about prime Russ, that's fair.
That's what I was going to say, too, was for the kids out there, Russell Wilson used to be really good.
He was a good quarterback.
Oh, yeah, he's great. Just, probably 5 years too late.
Emphasis on the was.
Right. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back and talk a little bit more in depth about Georgia, Tennessee, what we're watching for, some of the players we're really interested in seeing. And then at the end, we'll talk just a little bit about Georgia basketball. All right, Ben, Georgia at Tennessee, 3:30 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday. Later in this week, probably drop Friday morning, we will have a preview episode with Go Vols 24/7's Patrick Brown. Really go in depth on Tennessee, learning about these Volunteers and what we need to watch out for on Saturday. But figured it was a good opportunity for us to discuss this a little bit. And I want to start with Vegas. This line opened, I want to say at like 7.5. The last number I am seeing as we sit here on Tuesday afternoon is 3.5. This is for Georgia. What do you make of that? The fact that the line has shifted so much in Tennessee, it's dropped. Georgia's still a favorite, but it's dropped in favor of Tennessee in the last few days.
I'd have to see where the money was at to know how I really feel about it. My assumption, based on how it's moved, is that when it opened at 7.5, it was probably about 80% of the money on Tennessee plus 7. Clearly, Vegas was going to feel at risk on that, and so they moved it down to minus 3.5. I'd love to see where the money is at now. If it's about 50-50 at minus 3.5, then Vegas is pretty vulnerable with a Tennessee win. You typically want to be on the side where Vegas is not vulnerable, so that would favor Georgia probably. But again, without knowing where the money's at, that's me just operating on assumptions in terms of how it's moved. Like, it's possible that more people are on Georgia minus 3.5 than Tennessee plus 3.5 once they've moved it as much as they did. I really don't know. So it might just be one of those situations where Vegas feels that they can win no matter what. But my guess is it's about 50-50 at minus 3.5, and that it's about 80-20 Tennessee's favor at minus 7, which means if Georgia covers 7, Vegas makes a lot of money.
All right, looking at this game and looking to Saturday, Ben, what do you need to see from Georgia, really on either side of the ball? The things you're looking for, if you see this, you think Georgia could be in good shape of going into Knoxville and leaving with a W?
To me, this will be a broken record from any Georgia-Tennessee matchup that's going to happen. Has happened in the Josh Heupel era over the last couple of years and is going to continue to happen in the Josh Heupel era. People have a misconception. Kirby Smart brought this up about what Tennessee is and what Tennessee isn't. People see them score 70 points. They see them hit on some big explosive plays when they confuse defenses and bust coverages, and everyone says this is a big play, pass-oriented offense. That is far from the case. There's a reason Dylan Sampson had 20 rushing touchdowns last season in the SEC, and that's because they pound the rock. They're going to continue to pound the rock. They recruit really well on the offensive line up front. And defensively, this is a fast, ferocious defense. I think Kirby Smart just described both sides of the ball as really physical. This is going to be a physical football game. I think that this is going to be a battle in the trenches. I don't see this game. I know Georgia has won by multiple scores every time in the Josh Heupel era. I don't see that going this way with the road effect, with the Georgia offense not being crystal clear in terms of what we should expect from them. But I think that if Georgia is able to stop Tennessee from running the ball or limit Tennessee from running the ball, really, I'll say, actually, I think it's as simple as this. Whichever team wins the rushing yards battle, wins the football game. That's really how I feel about this one. And I feel like Georgia right now stopping the run, and the way that it is using 3 different backs in a bunch of different ways makes this Georgia rushing attack much more dangerous. I think that Gunnar Stockton is going to get involved in the design run game in this one. I do think you've got to hit your own explosives. But with this Tennessee offense, as we know, as long as you prevent them from hitting those 50, 60 yarders in the passing game, you can make them have to work really hard for their offensive possessions. You want Tennessee not having 3, 4, 5 play drives. You want Tennessee having to do those 7, 8, 9 play drives. If you give up a 9-play drive touchdown to Tennessee, you can live with that, because I think that you would rather live in that world if you're Georgia than them confusing someone on the back end and hitting you for a big time explosive. And so stop Tennessee's explosives, beat them in the run game on both sides of the ball. I think Georgia wins this game.
You hit on the big one for me, and it goes back to the point that has been spoken ad nauseum around Georgia this offseason: running the ball, stopping the run. And I wanted to read this statistic that I wrote on Tuesday talking about Tennessee's run game. Tennessee has only rushed for more than 3.8 yards per carry against Georgia once in the last 9 meetings. That happened in 2023, and it stands as is. But the caveat to that is the opening run for Tennessee in that game, Jalen Wright goes 75 yards. If you take that carry out, again, the play happened, so I'm not discrediting the play. They average just 2.3 yards per carry in the game. So Georgia, that is a huge reason why Georgia has had this much success against Tennessee. They just have not allowed them to consistently run the football and to make those plays. So it's that for me. And then, 2, it goes back to the point about Georgia running the football. I need to see Nate Frazier. I need to see Dwight Phillips Jr., maybe a little bit of Chauncey Bowens. Get those guys going. Goes back to the offensive line conversation we had. Want to see those guys hold up well, open up opportunities. We know that this offensive line has been challenged throughout this offseason. If you can run the football well, not only is that going to put Tennessee on its heels, I think it's going to give Gunnar Stockton more confidence. He's not going to have to go out there and feel like, if I can't make this throw, we can't move the ball, and we're not winning this game. You run the ball well and you stop the run on the other side, I think Tennessee is going to be in trouble by the time the game's over.
Completely agree.
Before we get off of this conversation, Ben, give me 2 or 3 Georgia players that you're particularly interested in watching on Saturday. You know, guys that you're not necessarily saying are going to have a big day, but guys that Georgia needs to be able to count on when this game gets underway.
Well, we've already talked about him in the show because we got him for media availability yesterday. He had 7 catches last week, which was a Georgia career high. Colby Young is going to have to be big. I know that Zachariah Branch might end up having more receiving yards than him this year. He might have more explosive plays, but Colby Young feels like the one guy in the intermediate passing game that Gunnar Stockton feels really comfortable with right now. I think that Colby Young has shown, even just, through his brief time last season and so far this year, that windows just seem big for quarterbacks when they're throwing the ball to Colby Young. It just feels like an easier throw. I know he's a big frame and that adds to it, but there's just something about the way that he runs his routes and positions himself off of defenders to make catches that just makes quarterbacks feel and look more comfortable. So I think he's going to need to be big, especially on 3rd down. Some of those 3rd and 4 situations where you really need to just pick up 5 yards to extend a drive. It's not necessarily going to be there in the running game. Who does Gunnar Stockton feel comfortable going to? I think Colby Young has to be that guy this week and really throughout the entire season. One guy I'll add to the list, and I know there's been talk about the running backs a lot, and I know there's been talk about Nate Frazier and what he is and what he isn't. There's been talk about Chauncey Bowens and him really impressing people. I'm excited to see Dwight Phillips in SEC play because this dude is just freakishly fast, and there have been a couple moments in the Marshall and Austin Peay game where he has been a sliver away from breaking one for 60. And it's going to happen one of these days. Is it going to happen on Saturday against Tennessee? I don't know, but it's going to be the first time that we're really getting to see him play against a comparably fast defense. And when you talk to Georgia's defensive players about trying to stop Dwight Phillips when they see him in open space, they're just like, good luck. Like, if you do it, good on you. But chances are you're not touching him once he finds his crease. So I'm excited to see him as well. And then really, what does Georgia do? I know I'm cheating a little bit by saying 2 guys here, but what does Georgia do at starter at corner? Is it Ellis Robinson or is it Daniel Harris? That's going to be a fascinating decision. Does that mean that it's only going to be that guy for the rest of the year? No, probably not. Maybe Daniel Harris's experience in an environment like this gives him the upper hand. Maybe Ellis Robinson has just come on so much in the last couple of weeks, has probably outperformed Daniel Harris over the last 2 weeks of the season. And that's not just talking about the interception that he had on the deflection last week. So what happens there? And then what happens at safety opposite of KJ Bolden? I think it'll be Kyron Jones, just based on the way that he's played up to this season. He has gotten the start the last 2 weeks. He looks different moving out there compared to some of the transfers that they brought in, compared to Ja'Cory Thomas. It's maybe a little bit of a surprise that that's the way that it's played out to me, probably not to Georgia coaches, but if it's Kyron Jones and depending on who it is over there at cornerback 2, what do those 2 guys look like to help limit the explosive passing game that Tennessee can have down the field?
Kyron Jones was going to be one for me. I mean, I think KJ Bolden's had a fantastic first 2 games. He was all over the place against Austin Peay. And Kyron, I think, has played well, but he's going to be the safety that gets tested if he is the one who starts. And I do think it will be Kyron Jones against Tennessee. So how does he play? Can he hold up to the moment? Continue to be interested if the ball's around him. He's got that club, I think, on his right hand. So that kind of makes things a little difficult, but we'll see what he does there. Shout out the other guy on defense, Jordan Hall, and it goes back to the conversation we just had about stopping the run. How well does that defensive front hold up? Him and Christian Miller, I thought, did well early in that Austin Peay game as far as stuff in the run, preventing Austin Peay from really ever getting anything going on the ground. So how does Jordan Hall hold up? Going back to offense, shout out 2 different guys. Dylan Bell. Dylan's a guy that has really hurt Tennessee in the past. I think about 2 years ago, he had a touchdown catch, and I think he had a touchdown pass in that win in Knoxville. And he just has not been able to get anything going so far this year. I really think that deep shot to him against Austin Peay was probably more of a chance to try to get him some confidence because these jet sweeps, they just haven't worked so far. Watching Dylan Bell to see how he's involved. And then sticking on the offense, a guy that I think has a big opportunity is Oscar Delp. And it feels like the start of this year has sort of mirrored a little bit of what we saw for the majority of the regular season last year. It just felt like Georgia struggled to get the tight ends involved in the passing game. You go back to the Tennessee game last November, Oscar Delp has his first touchdown catch of the season in November. He winds up having 2 in that game. I think that Georgia knows they got to get the tight ends more involved. I've been surprised through 2 weeks that those guys haven't caught more passes, but I think that'll happen on Saturday, and that we'll see Oscar Delp be one of those top targets when it comes to the passing game.
Yeah, I mean, I know Kirby Smart had to answer for it yesterday in terms of tight end usage in that game. I think that, he targeted Lawson Lucky on the one where he got his feet caught up. And there, like as Kirby Smart mentioned, there were certain reads where they would have been the first or second read and they just didn't go that direction. But I do think you're going to need to get the tight ends involved in the passing game. And again, I'm going to say what I've already said on this show, and so I don't need to say it too much more. But I think that the overreaction to what Gunnar Stockton is capable of in the passing game will be corrected this week when Georgia goes to Knoxville.
All right. Again, as I mentioned before, keep an eye out. Should be Friday morning. We will have our preview podcast with Patrick Brown from Go Vols 24/7. We'll go in depth on Georgia, Tennessee, learn more about the Vols. Georgia men's basketball minute. Just a couple of quick things as Georgia gets ready. And, their season's about 2 months from getting started. Next Monday will be the first chance we get to hear from Mike White as the team continues practicing, getting ready for the 25-26 season. We'll be interested to hear from him, and I believe we'll be hearing from players every once a week starting next week until the season opener. So that'll be a good opportunity there to learn a little bit more about this team as they try to make it back-to-back NCAA tournament appearances. So we'll see what they do there. Other interesting thing, they've announced a couple of exhibitions. Georgia is going to play Georgia State, and they're also going to play Troy before the season, getting a couple of tune-ups against some Sun Belt teams. But been going to be really interesting. Jonas Hayes coaching Georgia State. There was a lot of talk about Jonas when the Georgia job opened last time. I think a lot of folks on the Junkyard will be interested to see what Georgia does against a Georgia State team that's still building, still trying to get something going under the former Dog.
Yeah, the Junkyard over Dawgs 24/7 will look an awful lot like the first half of Austin Peay if Georgia State finds a way to win that exhibition.
Yep, that is it's pretty accurate, but I think those will be 2 nice tune-ups for Georgia getting ready for the season ahead. Well, we will end the episode right there. I appreciate Ben for popping on. Thanks to everyone who watched or listened to this live. Everyone who's watching or listening to it after the fact, go subscribe to Dawgs247.com. A lot of good intel as we get ready for SEC play. Kind of hard to believe, but we're already at that point. Subscribe to the Junkyard Dawgcast wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe to the YouTube Dawgs 24/7. We got a big week ahead. Thursday morning, we should have an episode up of the Georgia Beat Show. That's going to be me, Rivals Roddy Nobulsi. I believe Dog Nation's Connor Riley is going to be a part of that. There may be some other media members involved. Just sitting down, kind of having a round table, talking about Georgia. Super excited to get that involved. Keep an eye out on Saturday for our Speak Pipe link. We're hoping to get that involved. Get your guys' voices into our episodes as we talk about Georgia and Tennessee, how things go for Georgia in Knoxville, and what we think about the road ahead for Georgia. Go subscribe to our TikTok. A lot of good content there. And again, we are just a few days away from the start of SEC play, and we are super excited to get this thing going. So we'll end the episode right there. For Ben Wolk, I'm Jordan Hill. Until next time, take care, everybody.